Here to discuss the ongoing fallout from the FBI's raid on Mar-a-Lago, as well as the one-year anniversary since 13 Marines were killed during the troop drawdown in Afghanistan. Our next guest is Florida Congressman Greg Steube. Congressman Greg Steube, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Congressman, you are an Iraq war veteran yourself. We thank you for your service. We're 1 year out from the withdrawal of Afghanistan, where 13 Marines were killed in the waning days, paying the ultimate sacrifice. What questions still remain from the Afghanistan withdrawal?
Well, as you and I sit here having a conversation over a year later, there's still Americans stuck in Afghanistan, and we have no answers as to who they are. Are they attempting to get out? The last time Secretary Blinken was at the Foreign Affairs Committee, he stated there was like 40-something, 100-something that wanted to get out, and there was another report that 800-something were taken out over the last year. So obviously their numbers don't match up. Their numbers have never matched up. How many Americans are still stuck behind enemy lines dealing with the Taliban to get out, and how many of them were killed by the Taliban? How many operators that were Afghan nationals that assisted our service members were killed after the takeover? All of this could have been prevented. And it's a sad day in America where $80 billion worth of military equipment was surrendered to a terrorist organization.
Now, we've all recently seen the reports that al-Qaeda's #1 in command was allegedly killed in Afghanistan. Should we be celebrating this, or should we be more concerned that he made his way back into Afghanistan reportedly 6 months after the U.S. withdrew?
Yeah, what this tells us, because he was killed openly on a balcony in downtown Kabul, is that al-Qaeda is out and operating openly in Afghanistan. And obviously the Taliban, because they work together on terrorist activities, there's no check and balance there. So al-Qaeda is flooding back into Afghanistan because they know they have a safe haven that is the Taliban that runs the country. And, I'm not privy to the intel that we had to take him out. But what that shows you is that you have the leader of al-Qaeda in downtown Kabul standing outside in his balcony, which allegedly he did on a regular basis. So they are living out in open, in public, and everybody knows that they're there. And that should cause some real significant concern, because Secretary Blinken and others said, oh, al-Qaeda is not going to come back if we withdraw from Afghanistan. That's exactly what's occurred.
Congressman, I want to get your thoughts on the FBI's raid of Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate. The latest, former President Trump's government and personal passports have been confiscated in this raid.
Yeah, it's a sad day in America where you have the weaponized Justice Department targeting a president and basically using subterfuge to go in there and search for documents. Allegedly, he didn't turn over classified information. Well, he was the president of the United States. He can declassify information if he chooses to do that. There's so many things here that are wrong on so many different levels. There was another report this morning that 14 different whistleblowers have gone to Ranking Member Jim Jordan about this specific raid. That tells you that there is a ton of information that we don't have, and the information that we do have doesn't make any sense. We have a weaponized, politicized Department of Justice that is targeting a former president and the #1 contender to take on Joe Biden in 2024. And that should give every American pause as to what's going on in our justice system right now.
What impact do you see the raid having on the midterms?
Well, you've already seen a huge increase, like 10% increase in support in polling for President Trump's reelection if he decides to run, which I think he's going to. And I think this galvanizes people in the midterms, because those that were moderate, those that were independent, see this for what this is. You have a completely politicized DOJ that went after a former president and the #1 contender to take on Joe Biden in the midterm, or in 2024. This is absolutely what the American people don't stand for, is a political justice system. Our justice system should be fair and equal for all and treated universally based on the crime. And that's absolutely not what's happening here. And I think this is galvanizing those people that are like, okay, this is going way too far. This is taking a step way too far in the politicization of our Justice Department.
Iraq war veteran, Congressman Greg Steube, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
A federal court in Georgia ordered Senator Lindsey Graham to testify about phone calls he made to Georgia election officials during the 2020 election. Graham plans to appeal this. The senator argues he's exempt from this type of inquiry as an elected official. This as Rudy Giuliani is now a target in Georgia's investigation. Here's NTD's Melina Wisecup with more.
A federal judge in Georgia has now denied Senator Lindsey Graham's bid to reject a subpoena, meaning the South Carolina senator will now have to testify before Georgia's Fulton County grand jury. This grand jury is currently investigating former President Donald Trump's allegations of voter fraud in Georgia during the 2020 presidential election. The grand jury mainly wants to ask Graham about 2 phone calls he made to Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger and his staff. He asked the official to take another look at absentee ballots. Senator Graham appealed the first subpoena, saying his inquiries were legitimate since he had to vote on certifying the election.
Senator Graham went to federal court and relied on the Constitution in arguing that, hey, you can't call me in to testify because what I would be talking about would be privileged information as part of my legislative duties. That federal judge, Judge May, rejected that argument completely and said, you've stepped outside of your role when you made these calls to the Secretary of State in Georgia.
The judge ruled that the Fulton County District Attorney has shown, quote, extraordinary circumstances and a special need for Senator Graham's testimony. Attorney Willis, a Democrat, opened the investigation in 2021 and has subpoenaed Graham and Representative Jody Hice, as well as 5 others, focusing on alleged misconduct among allies of former President Donald Trump related to the 2020 election. Graham is required to testify next week on August 23rd. But this could change if the senator appeals the ruling as expected.
Senator Graham, I think, has already indicated through his office that they're going to continue to challenge this. If so, they have to seek permission to challenge it in front of the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, which is here in Atlanta.
Melina, this court order for Senator Graham to testify in Georgia comes as prosecutors in the state are ramping up the pressure on Rudy Giuliani's testimony. What can you tell us about Giuliani's involvement here?
So Rudy Giuliani is the personal lawyer of former President Trump, and Georgia prosecutors are now labeling him as a target of this investigation. Giuliani was on the front lines. He was one of the key players in Georgia trying to expose what they were calling election fraud. He testified to the Georgia legislature. Specifically, he showed a video that revealed what they were saying was evidence of election fraud. We all remember that suitcase of ballots from Fulton County where former President Donald Trump, Giuliani, and others were pointing to that as clear evidence of election fraud. So this is something where the district attorney in Fulton County is really honing in on and trying to get more information about why he made these allegations and possibly his ties to former President Trump during that time when they were really amping up that grassroots efforts to overturn those 2020 presidential election results. Now, what's different in Giuliani's case here versus Senator Lindsey Graham is that Giuliani is not able to rely on the same constitutional protections that Senator Lindsey Graham is saying that he has as an elected official to avoid testifying. So Giuliani is expected to testify to this grand jury later this week after previously delaying his court appearance last week due to a health issue. So he will be there later this week, but his attorneys say he will try to guard conversations between himself and former President Donald Trump. Steve, back to you.
NTD's Melina Wisecup reporting. 3 top-ranking House Republican lawmakers sent a letter to FBI Director Christopher Wray. They said Wray used a taxpayer-funded government plane to travel to his New York vacation home. The lawmakers said in the letter, you reportedly departed on the FBI's Gulfstream 550 jet, an agency aircraft initially intended for counterterrorism use, to make the 1 hour and 12-minute journey to Saranac Lake. Further, it has been reported that you made a similar personal trip on a government aircraft on June 2nd and June 5th, 2022. According to the Government Accountability Office, the FBI director must make reimbursement payments for personal travel to the FBI Finance Division. Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick said that his state was sending buses of illegal immigrants to Democrat-run sanctuary cities in hopes that they will urge President Biden to secure the border. Texas Governor Greg Abbott is taking donations to transport illegal border crossers to Washington, D.C. and New York City. D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser and New York City Mayor Eric Adams complained that they did not have the resources to support the influx of illegal immigrants. Abbott said that they were being hypocritical.
Now, once they have to deal with the reality of it, they're suddenly flummoxed and they cannot handle it. They are now getting a taste of what we're having to deal with.
Tennessee Senator Marsha Blackburn says that some illegal immigrants threaten the bus drivers to stop in her home state of Tennessee. She said many are trying to get to airports or hubs where they can work off their debt for the cartels.
Many of them have that debt to work out. So getting to one of these hubs and working in whatever way, labor gangs, the sex trafficking, which to me, the way the women and children are being treated is just awful.
Blackburn blamed President Biden's policies for the crisis and added that every state is a border state until the southern border is secured. The southern border continues to be flooded with illegal immigrants from all over the world. Just a few days ago, I spoke with Texas Congressman Babin on what the situation looks like now. Here's our discussion. Congressman Babin, thank you for joining us.
Great to be with you, Steve.
Congressman, I want to ask you about a recent bipartisan bill that was introduced in the Senate. Senator Lankford, Senator Sinema, a Republican and a Democrat, they've introduced legislation that would provide more funding, more support for Border Patrol agents specifically. We talk about the human toll often, but not so much about the toll that this crisis is taking on Border Patrol. How do you think the House would go about supporting this bill?
Well, I can tell you the Republican side of the House will be in great support of that bill. I'm hoping that there will be some Democrats, lots of them, that will support this as well, because I don't think the Border Patrol has had lower morale at any time in their history. They have been just relegated to totally insignificance, to be Uber drivers and babysitters and basically facilitators and processors of illegal aliens to come across the border. The law states, Steve, that asylum seekers are to be detained, and yet this administration under Secretary Mayorkas simply ignores the law, violates his oath of office, and continues to release these people into the interior of the United States. And the Border Patrol is suffering greatly. We need to support our Border Patrol. And after they were accused of whipping Haitian immigrants several months ago, and then being punished, even after they were found to have done nothing wrong, is inexcusable. The Biden administration is absolutely to blame, because Mayorkas and Biden himself criticized them and said they will pay, quote unquote. And so I think you're going to see a day of reckoning in November in these midterm elections. And when that happens, I think that you're going to see a lot of Democrats that will be suddenly turned into lame ducks. And you don't have to look any further than Myra Flores in the 34th district in South Texas, first Republican elected in that district in over 100 years, a young Hispanic who happens to be married to a Border Patrol agent. And we have three other Hispanics that are really young female Hispanics. Hispanics are, especially in the state of Texas, they don't want to see an out-of-control border. They don't want to see the chaos, the crime, the disease, the drugs, the overrunning of their houses, farms, and communities and ranches. They don't want to see that. And I think you're going to see a major turnout of at least Texas Hispanics, and I think many others across this nation are going to vote for Republicans this go around.
People up north in the blue states where this isn't that close to home don't necessarily realize that. And it brings me to my next question for you. You mentioned Border Patrol acting as Uber drivers. People may or may not know there's a lot of illegal aliens that are being bused to cities like Washington, D.C., now New York City, and we're seeing the mayors of these two cities wanting to openly, publicly saying they want to turn these illegal immigrants away Why do you think that is?
It is incredible that somebody could be that short-sighted. The mayor of D.C., the mayor of New York City, many of these other mayors. Let me tell you something. Our governor here, Governor Abbott, he's loading them up on buses and airplanes, and he's sending them up to D.C., and then all of a sudden we had, oh, goodness gracious, I don't know which mayor it was, either D.C. or New York, it said, we had 2,500 people that have gone into our homeless shelter and overwhelmed it. Well, whoopee-doo, 2,500, that's not even a few hours what comes across our southern border. And they have been advocates of opening our borders up and swamping our border counties and border states. And now they're getting a taste of what we've had.
Texas Congressman Brian Babin.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
100% of Americans say they are still impacted by inflation. This is while Congress just passed another major spending bill dubbed the Inflation Reduction Act last Friday. According to a new poll last week from The Economist, 95% said inflation is affecting them at least a little, and 56% said it's affecting them a lot. According to the survey, 98% of those who have been impacted by inflation are Republicans, while 94% are Democrats. Meanwhile, in Congress, no Republicans voted to pass the Inflation Reduction Act. Some analysts say the bill also focuses on issues such as climate, healthcare, and energy, which will not impact inflation. I had a chance to talk with Arizona Congressman Andy Biggs and got his take on the Inflation Reduction Act. Here's a look. What do you think that means for the people of Arizona and for the country?
Well, I think that's a horrible bill. I think it will actually extend the time of the inflationary pressure. I think it will add to the contraction in the economy that's working on the other end. I also say it's very dangerous for the country because they're going to spend $80 billion on IRS agents to go after regular Americans, and they're scoring it as a $120 billion revenue gain by hiring these folks, which tells me that they think that they're going to go after and attack Americans. And if they do that again with a political purpose in mind, that'll be very, very dangerous to this country. So I hate the bill, you're right. Everything seems to run through Arizona today.
That's an interesting point you make. Isn't it Congress's responsibility to come up with innovative ways to generate money, whether that be reducing taxes, increasing business opportunities, as opposed to coming up with more or building more of a bureaucracy?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we saw that under the Trump tax cuts because all of a sudden we generated revenue, we generated economic activity, and when you generate economic activity, naturally the revenue is going to increase for your tax base. And the other thing it incentivized companies to come back into the U.S. You saw an increase in that. You had 93 million people working. You had more people at work in every demographic with real wage increases than you'd seen in 40 years. And so this notion that we should be raising taxes, which is I think it's a $220 billion tax increase projected here, it's going to get passed right along down to the lower and middle income people because corporations never pay taxes. I tell people this all the time. You need to understand, corporations don't say, okay, we're going to go ahead and pay this tax. They view it as an expense, and they expense that out to the consumer who's buying their products. And so we're all going to be paying more. And in inflation, so you're going to add a higher cost to an already inflated economy. At the same time, you're going to contract the output of the economy too. So it's a bad bill. It's a double whammy.
Congressman Andy Biggs, thank you so much.
Thanks.